So, as a film about a relentless and persevering protagonist who stands up against a greedy mega corporation, really few movies have ever more closely embodied their own message than Coyote vs. Acme. The fully complete and ready to release film was very controversially shelved by Warner Brothers back in 2023 as a mere tax write-off, but now rescued from extinction by a new distribution company, the movie is finally seeing the light of day. I think many people, including myself, have been cheering for this film to be good, but I think the case the film must make is this. First, it must justify its own existence, and second, it must prove that the Looney Tunes brand is still relevant in a Gen Alpha world. Does it succeed? Well, I have seen it, so let's talk about it. So I think the answer to my opening questions is yes, and also no. I think it clearly succeeds at the first, but to me, the jury does remain out on the second. I think overall, Coyote vs. Acme offers plenty of wacky fun and charm, and is easily one of the most successful sort of animated live action hybrids in many years, but its more mature tone and content may make it at least a bit trickier sell for family audiences. The sort of Who Framed Roger Rabbit template of real world kind of animated hybrid seems to have become a mostly neglected storytelling device, but Coyote vs. Acme is just a reminder of its creative potential. A fellow kind of Looney Tunes movie, Space Jam, is perhaps the most enduring example of the genre, but I think unlike that film in which a human is sort of transported into a cartoon Looney Tunes world, Coyote vs. Acme is sort of the opposite and features a mostly human world, just one colored with quirky cartoon characters on the side, and the hybrid style is definitely this film's kind of main selling point, and I think responsible both for some of the film's best and worst aspects. On the positive side, the cartoon kind of infusion of the real world is just absolutely delightful. I think the two worlds have rarely, if ever, been so seamlessly blended. I think it is clear that this film is very much a love letter to the sort of imaginative cartoon worlds of the past. Watching human characters interact with iconic cartoon elements, like painting a train tunnel onto a wall, is consistently amusing, and I think will have audiences grinning, especially if you, like me, kind of grew up with these classic cartoon tropes. I think just seeing this world come to life is itself worth the price of admission. Unfortunately, the story itself is not always as fun as the world that it takes place in. I think the actual concept of Wile E. Coyote suing the Acme company for years of malfunctioned gadgets, I think is brilliant and quite hilarious, but I think it's notable that the Looney Tunes is not included in this film's title. I think despite featuring some of the iconic characters, it just never really felt like a Looney Tunes movie. Audiences hoping to see plenty of the lovable classic characters may be a bit disappointed, as most only appear in a single scene and are more of a cameo than they are a featured role. And even when the characters are on screen, they just seldom capture sort of that same charm, and it's almost in a weird way that they often feel like actors playing the Looney Tune characters rather than the original cast themselves, with many of their kind of distinctive traits and personalities just oddly muted. It's also clear to me that I think the Looney Tunes face a bit of an identity crisis as they try to remain relevant in today's world. I think kind of the brand's playbook recently has been an attempt to sort of cater to the nostalgia of its existing kind of now older audience rather than inspire a similar love and the current generation of young viewers. For example, as a father with two Gen Alpha children, I think Coyote vs. Acme feels more aimed at me than it does at them. And to be clear, there's still enough zany kind of cartoon antics to please younger viewers too. I mean, seeing Tweety Bird use a grenade chicken launcher to shoot exploding eggs at a human character who are racing down the highway in animated rocket boots is just wacky fun that transcends generations. But at the same time, the plot of a legal court case and a disproportionate number of humans to cartoons on screen, and just a much darker tone than the typical bright great Looney Tunes world might make it less of like a shared generational family experience than some parents might be hoping for. I should note too that like, as with many of the classic cartoons, the Looney Tunes have always pushed the limits with like innuendos and gags. Still, I think the unexpected inclusion of things like a handful of profanities and crude words in Coyote vs. Acme is one of, I think, several signs that it's perhaps sort of rocketing further down that path. Also, in some ways, the film also kind of follows the recent trend of movies like Barbie or Masters of the Universe as stories that function almost more as like a commentary on the property or like the brand itself and our relationship to it, rather than simply as like an adaptation of that property. I think the film's sort of social commentary about greedy corporations disrespecting and abusing, classic cartoon characters for financial gain feels validated by the film's own troubled distribution journey. At the same time that these sort of evil corporations are noticeably led or supported by the specific characters in the Looney Tunes canon with sort of southern drawl accents, or that its antagonistic humans are slick men in suits who kind of verbally declare things like God bless America and our troops, while also being total hypocrites, may be some sort of social commentary that is less eagerly embraced by Christian or conservative audiences. I think the film attempts to have some like thematic depth, and at times it does work, but at other times it may leave audiences simply wanting to see some cartoons explode themselves with TNT rather than more attempts at like on-the-nose messaging and satire. As far as content to consider, things going on the surface of this, there's not necessarily a ton, but there definitely are some things just to be aware of. For language, like I said, there are several like minor profanities, mostly beginning with the letters D and H, as well as like just some other crude or like vulgar words. And you do have God's name used several times. Also, sort of like a fictional spoof on like the scientific Latin name for the Roadrunner species is an allusion to a profanity, something like Fastus Hellenus, or along those lines. You also have a mute character, the Coyote, who uses like signs to communicate. And at one point, before he suffers a lot of pain, holds up a sign with sort of various random characters to indicate profanity. And also, you have a scene near the end where a human character appears to sort of flip off the middle finger at the camera, although his hand is like blurred out. As far as violence, as you would expect, there is plenty of sort of the familiar Looney Tunes-esque violence done toward cartoon characters who don't really seem to be overly bothered by the harm that they experience. Although some of the violence does have like a slightly darker connotation, such as scenes in which cartoon characters are experimented on in a lab. As far as sexuality, you have a cartoon character who attempts to enlist two human characters to be his like nude models for a portrait that he's painting, and they thankfully resist his invitation. But later, a cartoon character, one known for not often or ever wearing pants, does like arrive sort of eager to fill that role. Then later, you have a woman, like a human cartoon character, who shares rumors that her missing husband in fact ran off with his secretary, but she rejects these rumors, revealing that his secretary is in fact a penguin. Then also in a scene taking place in like a laboratory, the characters test out something called predator spray, in which they spray a suddenly appearing skunk Pepe Le Pew, which obviously offers a very clear sort of double meaning for the word predator. And the only other kind of content things for you to maybe be aware of is you do have a character, a human character, who questions whether he displeased a witch or something as like an explanation for his current trouble, only for an actual cartoon witch to appear on screen and kind of deny the claim. And also you have the characters who are sent by another character to a location in the film that is called 666 Scary Road. As far as themes, worldview, things going on beneath the surface, this film's sort of central messages and themes are very much intertwined just with its own existence. Kind of the movie unfolds as a clear, like, underdog tale about standing up to the greed and corruption of wealthy and like powerful institutions, even when success of that endeavor seems unlikely. And that general message is obviously easy to affirm, and I think parents can sort of help apply it to their children in more relatable ways, such as just like standing up against like the school bully or something like that. But as I mentioned earlier, some of the specifics of like how the film kind of colors its evil institutions, kind of reflective of political conservatives or like Christianity is perhaps like a bit less just agreeable or wanted. Although the Bible is very clearly filled with instructions to like stand up for the needy and the vulnerable and like just be a voice for those who cannot defend themselves. But also for younger viewers or just those who are not as like immersed in the inner workings of pop culture in the industry or like care about the film's sort of social commentary, there is like just a more basic theme of perseverance. The film really does manage to sort of like recontextualize the character of Wile E. Coyote, kind of typically used as the butt of jokes, and like the repeated failure of his brilliant and like complex schemes and like inventions make him like a pretty sad and like tragic character. But in Coyote vs. Acme, he is instead a victim where like his repeated attempts, despite their inevitable failure, are no longer like just laughable, but actually something worthy of like respect and admiration. And honestly, by the end, like I almost wanted the poor guy to finally catch the Roadrunner. But in that way, I think the film kind of embodies just the biblical truth in Romans 5 that says suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope. And obviously, chasing after the Roadrunner with like dreams of eating him is not the same thing as relentlessly sort of moving forward toward godliness and like spiritual maturity. But still, I think Christians can take some inspiration from Wile E. Coyote to not give up the pursuit, even when the proverbial anvils of life seem to constantly fall on our heads. In the end, I'm glad that Coyote vs. Acme is finally getting a very deserved release. It's just hard not to like root for the film to succeed in its own sort of David versus Goliath underdog tale. I think it boasts enough sort of creative energy to make for a very entertaining experience, even if it fails to make, I think, a convincing case just for the viability and like relevance of the beloved Looney Tune characters for like today's younger audiences. It's notable that like many of the film's most successful jokes are built on allusions to like classic cartoon tropes and like cherished personalities that the franchise has just struggled to build up for the next generation. I think the question of can the Looney Tunes still survive and thrive in like a Minions world, I think honestly I'm not quite sure, but I think like Coyote vs. Acme and its very persevering hero demonstrate, sometimes what matters most is just to keep on trying. But hey, I would love to hear what you think if you are just a big fan of the Looney Tunes or you just want to support films against the greedy Hollywood corporations. Don't be shy, but jump into the comment section. Let's have a conversation on it. If you haven't done so too, encourage you guys, subscribe to the channel, become a Collider. Got lots of other movie reviews, got pop culture commentary, got interviews, just other fun stuff. Would love to have you be a part of that. But most of all, guys, thank you for watching. Stay safe and continue to collide through a world for Christ.